Okay, guys, so here's kind of the big deal that's going on right now, which is let's just put it out there. Vladimir Putin has just attacked and begun lighting up many of the cities in Ukraine. Specifically, I'm going to go ahead and read from the article, The New York Times. Live updates: Ukraine says Russia has begun its invasion. Several Ukrainian cities were under attack on Thursday morning. President Biden condemned President Vladimir Putin's actions, saying he would speak to the American people on Thursday. It is now Thursday. And the issue is that they're now showing images of large explosions, bombings that have occurred basically in Ukraine. As a result of this, I wanted to go ahead and create a video and go into some of the details as to how it's going to affect people going forward. Now, earlier today, I read an article specifically about what's going to happen with essentially Russia and Ukraine and how it's going to affect America. Specifically, I'm going to shape it into how it's going to affect those who are retired and disabled. Howdy, David Smith. Howdy, howdy. Adam Brock. Howdy, howdy. So, yeah, they're hitting the capital. They're hitting multiple areas right now. So it's kind of a bad situation. But let's talk real quick. There was a correspondent that used to work with doing reports specifically on Russia. And if I'm going to simplify this, like make it as simple as it possibly can be understood, this is the following as to what's going on. We all remember what happened with the Iran situation, Afghanistan, etc. And to some degree, what that equates to is basically we as American people went and took over a country for whatever reasons, and the result of it was to get a bunch of oil, fuel, reserves, options, purchase capacity, etc. And as a result of that, we're seeing a similar thing happening here, except this is a more complex situation. There's a massive pipeline going through Ukraine. Ukraine, every time they flirt with the idea of interacting more and joining up with European-based nation desires, we end up with a situation where Russia becomes very nervous. The reason for this is that if the United States were to put more military gear, etc., into Ukraine, it would be on the doorstep, on the border of Russia, and Russia does not like that idea. So the bottom line is that this is truly the first major test of Biden and the Biden White House administration in the coming years to be going forward. I need you guys to understand that this is going to very heavily affect those who are retired and disabled because of the fixed income situation. Gas prices. So as you know, we were a fuel sufficient nation. We were capable of supplying it on our own from our own nation. Then we shut down the XL pipeline and then gave grants to other pipelines to go ahead and start working. And the bottom line is that we became a not self-sufficient country under Biden's agenda. And then we saw him attached to Ukraine. We know he has a huge history with Ukraine. We know that there's potential fraud situations with Ukraine attaching to his son. And at the end of the day, we now know as a result of that, that we expect Biden, because of his prior relationship with Ukraine, to step in heavily. It will not take more than, I would say, 3 to 4 days for Russia to completely and utterly take over Ukraine. I do not know whether or not the president of Ukraine will survive the night into the morning, but it is very likely at this point that basically he'll be taking over that general area and taking over the fuel from that area. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Russia, one of the major exports of Russia is natural gas. And one of the things that they need more of is kind of like your fuels, things like that, gas, diesel, etc. And these countries essentially basically, whatever they have, bigger countries need, because Russia is a petrol country. A lot of their stuff is not, they're not riding around on Teslas. So the bottom line is that Russia essentially exists with the capacity to have massive consumption needs of fuel. And if they lose Ukraine, then what's going to happen is if they lose it and lose it to the Europeans in the sense of U.S. being able to set up bases there, then it's going to be a huge issue, because then Putin will have essentially a loss of potential of the fuel there. He will also have a loss of the potential of having the United States, the big dog on the field, right on the border. So we know that in the months directly before this happening, Biden was working specifically with China's leadership on formulating certain things. So what I believe is going to be happening is basically China and Russia will be creating some form of new currency. That new currency will become a new form of international trade, which will directly injure the the national world currency of business, which is U.S. tender, the U.S. dollar, which means that basically most things in America, or most things being imported back into America, will become extremely expensive because the value of the dollar will shrink immensely. And the way that works is that the U.S. has been able to play a lot of financial games over the years. They've been able to basically go ahead and have tons and tons of money being used all over the world, which has allowed them to play with the currency significantly. Whereas when a country is just restricted to their currency being used in that country, they're obviously a much, much poorer country in comparison to having lots and lots of tender being used outside of the country. And remember, countries always trade, specifically, this chair is going to break on me, I can feel it. Sure, they always trade in kind, but with the main international currency being the US tender, basically that's what's used for most businesses. So what's happening is that this is going to devalue the US dollar significantly because of international trade. It's also going to make fuel prices, which, as long as Biden switches us back to XL pipeline building, getting back to what Trump was doing, if he does that, we should be okay. But it almost seems like, and I'm not going to say he's doing this, but it almost seems like Biden is sacrificing the U.S. And basically doing the wrong thing consistently. And as a result of that, it just looks like we're going to have extremely high fuel prices. Maybe we could be seeing $6, $7, $8. Nobody really knows that at this point what's going on. We're also going to be seeing increased food prices as a part of this. The one beautiful thing that the United States has that has saved its butt consistently and allowed it to basically do well is, we are a continent that is way the heck away from China and Russia. Obviously, Alaska is right next to Russia, but for the most part, we've got some buffers there. Is the U.S. Is the XL pipeline for export of Canadian oil? Not entirely. No, I've heard a lot of arguments about that, and what's interesting about that is that the idea backing it is that everybody's arguing the XL pipeline wasn't for the U.S. benefit, blah blah blah. It clearly was. I mean, the amount of jobs, U.S. jobs that were used to interact with that alone, the benefit was massive. So at the end of the day, what's going to happen now is that China and Russia have already worked out a plan for something that they want to do. And as a result of that, the problem is that we don't know exactly when China is going to interact with this situation. And when China does interact with the situation, to some degree, we could call it a world war at that point. So what happens next is, what will Biden do? And a lot of people are worried about that, and rightfully so. So the bottom line is, Biden has a long history with Ukraine. Biden knows that to get involved would be getting involved with the two big dogs other than the United States, which are Russia and China. Because Russia and China have the capacity to, as a team, cause a potential either stalemate or win over the United States, it's a tough situation where the United States, for the first time in really history, has had to stand back and say, we won't. Well, that's not true. Back with George Washington and the French, there was another moment, but it's the first time in history of the modern military show that we see going on, that essentially the United States might actually not have to interact with this scenario. Now, will Russia stop with Ukraine alone? Well, the whole idea of what's going on is that Russia will likely take over Ukraine, get rid of the leadership in Ukraine. China will then take over Taiwan. Obviously, some of the other islands are incredibly worried as to what's going to happen in the South China Sea and things like that. They're worried about specifically, where does China end with all of this? We're seeing a reshaping. It's a reshaping, and America could get involved. They could not. At the end of the day, we have to consider a couple of things. First and foremost, our nation is in a really shitty place right now for basically, product creation. So as you guys saw with the whole situation involving the pandemic in the very beginning, we weren't able to make a lot of the safety products. that we needed to go ahead and have a working nation. In fact, the states were bidding, and then the federal government would swoop in and spend way too much money on it. And the personal protection devices, it was just like there was a crazy trying to buy it. China couldn't supply it fast enough, yada yada. And what's happening is we don't have tons of warehouses anymore where we're producing things like we used to. A lot of the skilled labor that's needed to make things, we no longer have. We kind of became a, you know, college educated group without a lot of hand operating skill oriented, capacity to make, welding or to go ahead and create modern plastics and do all those sorts of things. So we're going to somehow have to ramp it up, get really excited about not just being a service country. Gun sales are going to obviously go up. Shadow's looking at me like he wants more treats. And what will happen is at some point, America will almost certainly get dragged into this in some way, fashion, or form. As you know, Putin has already heard from America that they've got all these sanctions on them, right? But they don't really give a shit because it's all coming down to where they're going to be getting their oil from. And Russia wants to get their oil and lots of it. So the bottom line going forward is that the only question is really when World War III will begin. We'll begin with Russia interacting with the US in some way. We'll begin with some other European nation like France or Italy or whatever interacting with Russia, or will it be China beginning their battle and bombing of essentially Taiwan? My belief as to what I think is going to happen, just from seeing what I've seen, is that essentially we're going to have a situation where China waits as long as they can to make sure that they're safe to make their maneuver. So we'll probably see European nations interacting with Russia a lot sooner. Now, Russia is a big, scary dog, but Russia has a huge problem. And that's that the Allied nations of the old, World War II establishment, basically, there's a lot of them out there that could, slow him down significantly to the point where he would be ineffective. Will they do it? Now, as you know, with the Afghanistan situation, the Parliament of Britain denounced Biden. So the trust with our greatest ally of Britain it's not there at all. So that's a problem. The other issue is that when we had Afghanistan, we actually had a great strategic placement for a lot of our equipment, and now we don't have that. That's been completely taken over by the terrorists of Al Qaeda. And then, of course, there's a secondary group there that's trying to take it from them. So, kind of the bottom line here, guys, is that we are in a very difficult position where I do not fully know exactly when the U.S. is going to get involved. But if I were to put my penny on it, it would essentially be probably within a week. And first, the U.S. will claim more sanctions. Then the U.S. will start to send, like, your aid, like your Red Cross stuff and yada yada, weapons or whatever. But you got to remember something too. If Ukraine falls, America then has to look at what is their next step. And as you know, Russia, it's a situation where they spent a lot of money putting those troops there. Ukraine's a very large area. It's an area that my family came from. We kind of got sucked from Austria and Ukraine into Germany, and then obviously World War II. We ended up getting, as Ashkenazi Jews, sent over basically to America because we were fleeing. So, which is an interesting thing. You guys may not know this, but most of you are much more so Americans in the sense of length of time that you've been here than I am. I'm an immigrant, a couple of generations back. So, but kind of the bottom line is this. Cool, somebody from North Florida. The bottom line is this. I hope Biden would not get involved, but he's going to have to. There's no way around that. He's going to have to get involved. Here's how it's going to affect you guys. Food prices way up. Fuel prices way up. Remember how you were like, hey, I'm going to wait to get a used car. Well, now you're going to be waiting a really, really, really long time because obviously China is just waiting to go ahead and pick their moment in time as to when they're going to be, getting involved with taking over Taiwan and things like that. And if they take over Taiwan, they're basically taking over as much of they can of these islands to have a strategic military force to block the United States from being able to come through the Pacific in that area. Obviously, there are other countries which would not like to see that. One of the big ones is Australia, and they're going to be, and they've been buying a bunch of war machines left and right. So that's what's going on. But at the same time, you got to understand America's going to get pulled into this. There's no way around that situation because Russia's going to keep going after other countries, and China's going to start to establish, taking over other countries. And you'll see other smaller countries going against China and Russia. But let's be realistic here. There is only one mega dog in the fight, and that's America versus two really big dogs. And then, of course, you have Britain and maybe some Australia and maybe India and things like that starting to do things. But it's really America's might in Britain against basically these other groups. I would not say Spain. I would not say France. I would not say Switzerland have the capacity to really threaten, these other groups. Now, there's another problem too that people are starting to raise that's been popping up in the articles. What's happening is that basically they're talking about will things go nuclear. None of this is going to go nuclear unless one of these mega countries that has nuclear capacity is at the point where they're about to lose their capital. So if we look at the map of which countries have nuclear bombs, right? If we look at that map of this thing, we see that there's not many. And basically, at the end of the day, obviously, Russia and the USA have the most. Russia has a few, a bit more nuclear bombs than the United States. France, then China, then UK, then Pakistan, then India, Israel, North Korea. Basically, let's keep in mind France very far away from this Ukraine situation, in consideration. UK even farther away. But you look at Pakistan, you look at India, China situation, you look at Israel, North Korea is always an interesting situation. It could, if a capital of one of these mega countries is basically threatened to the point where Russia or China is about to take over them, and they are a nuclear-based capable nation, or at least that we know. We probably don't know if some of these countries have it at this point. We assume these are the big ones that have it, but there's probably many other countries that have it. So at this point, so let's see. Anthony said, "Why doesn't the president of Ukraine comply with Putin, give Putin what he wants?" Well, because they'll kill the president of Ukraine, or they'll enslave him. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's super excited about giving Putin whatever he wants. Du jour is out, $20. Thank you for covering how world news impacts the American people. Providing a holistic view and some history will help our most vulnerable. Excellent. Thank you, good sir. I appreciate it. So yeah, the historical reference here is that back during World War II, Russia was very unhappy with how things were kind of split up. The Cold War, not a good situation for them. And at the end of the day, there were many atrocities that occurred. Everybody references the Nazis, but there was also atrocities committed by the Russians, like at the very end of World War II. But the bottom line is that Russia was never happy with where the map lines had been drawn. And they always viewed, essentially, how the countries in Europe were drawn out to be against the ideology of what Russia stood for in World War II. And of course, Putin is a direct descendant of the leadership that falls in line with this communist-oriented ideology, which is ironic because the U.S. is pushing more and more towards communism, even though we're kind of, heavily into socialism right now. So what is going to happen is, and yeah, you're seeing it right now. There's all these major cyber attacks that happened a couple of hours ago. So first come the cyber attacks, then basically come the bombings, then come the strategic strikes, and then basically come the invasion of the land forces, along with paratroopers that are dropped behind. They're bringing in tanks, they're bringing in helicopters. So we're seeing the very beginning. What that means is that at this point, you're going to be seeing a lot of smoke images. You're going to be seeing a lot of bombing images. Probably by morning, I would say a third of Ukraine will have already been taken over. Probably by the end of tomorrow, the entire country of Ukraine will be taken over. Not a good situation, not a happy situation. Now let's talk about import export. In America, it's really expensive to mail things to other countries. Like, it's like $30 to mail something to China, 30 cents for them to mail it back. So what's going to happen is America's going to start to slap all these countries that join with Russia with all these restrictions and tariffs. Tariffs are they're bigger taxes on top of the import of items from those countries. So if Russia wanted to send something to America, they slap a big tariff, a big tax on it, and then it's harder for that item to be sold in America because it's getting taxed heavily. And people aren't going to want to buy it as much because now it's more expensive. So essentially, we're going to be seeing a problem because most of the stuff we buy, like what you have in your house, flip it over, it says made in China. Most of the stuff you have in your house is not made in Russia, but it is made in China, and China is going to be joining up with Russia with this whole thing. So what will happen is, putting it very simply, we are not going to be able to access a lot of the products that we traditionally use, which means that there's going to be a lot of new industries, a lot of new options for entrepreneurial people with warehouses to hire a bunch of people and start to, basically make these items. But there's going to be a 6-month period before this stuff all starts to roll out where America is really going to be struggling. My suggestion going forward is to buy a lot of food that takes essentially years to go bad. That way you have it, you're good to go. And I know you're going to argue with me that food stamps are not enough. I know that. I know. Look, if I were in politics, I would be fighting the battle for you guys. I'm just not at the moment. I'm barely getting enough sleep to do all the disability claimants I have. Deb Carter, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. Donated $10. So, I've got 2 hearings in the morning too. So my point is, guys, things that you should be doing as a fixed income retired and disabled person. Number 1 is food. If you can, go get a 5-gallon, basically fuel container. If your car is diesel, if your car is gasoline, fill it up. I would say it's going to take about a week and prices are going to surge. Another thing that you have to keep in mind too is that the price of fuel in the sense of diesel and gasoline for regular vehicles is going to shoot way up because this is just going to inspire the massive, electric van, delivery van war that's going on right now. Amazon has essentially switched companies as to who's going to provide their electric vans going forward. And once all of these delivery vans are switched over to electric vans, the price of fuel, gasoline and diesel, is going to go up even more. Diesel in my area is now $4 a gallon, which is absolutely horrific because most of the trucks that deliver the things that we use, 18-wheelers, use diesel. And they use massive diesel tanks. My truck, a dually F350, 7.3 diesel, it costs about $130 right now to fill it up. During the Trump era, it was around $80. So what I'd like to say is you need to have your food and you need to have your fuel. They will probably do certain things in this country to help the American people. Number 1, they might do another stimulus, if things start to get really bad. Number 2, they'll probably put off the tax deadlines for a lot of people. Number 3, if you have a Mustang, Mustangs are pretty expensive to fill up. But that's because, let's call it like it is. It's an awesome car. And then for all the people on here who hate Fords, whatever. So the point is this, and I have a Prius, and my Prius is like falling apart. I just got the battery replaced not too long ago, and then the damn bumper came off again, and it was just a total shit show. Like, and you would think like I'd have like a really high end car, but I don't, as far as disability attorneys go, like we don't make that much, so it's just one of those gigs where it's just one of those gigs. But anyway, I was able to fix the bumper. I used a lot of heavy duty. And then I shoved a broom into the side of it to keep it like held on there. But the point is this, guys, I love that Prius. That Prius and that's my ride and die bitch right there. So I love that car. And it will literally ride and die. The transmission will die at some point. The engine will go, whatever. But point is, you're going to have to start learning a little bit about repairing your vehicle, because replacement parts, which are mostly made in Asian countries, are not going to become available. And you have to remember that when you say China, you're also talking about places like Taiwan, Korea, etc., Vietnam. And so the problem is that people are not going to be able to buy a lot of the resources that they normally would buy easily, and everything's going to go way up in price. So you know how we have galloping inflation right now. Bacon's like 18% now, above what it was, in just a couple months ago. Well, now basically all the products that are not made locally are going to shoot way up. And when that happens, America's going to face a problem. They either keep getting products from China, or they basically go ahead and try and cut it off and then find a way to produce them here. There's too many products to try and produce here, so we're going to go into like a little bit of a Cuba stage where we just can't get stuff. Now, there's another thing that you have to keep in mind that's a problem with this whole situation of Russia and Ukraine. If China gets involved, we owe, and I was supposed to do a video on it like 3 weeks ago. So you can see what countries have in reserve as these mega trust funds. And we owe China significant amounts of debt, or rather of money to that debt, and that we've taken. So the problem is China has to be very wary, because if they piss off America too much, America will just say, we are not honoring our debt. We're going to war with you. World War III has begun. And that's a great way to basically get rid of debt. I would love to see the American people go to war over student debt, student loan debt, but I don't know. All right, so let me just give you a quick update on this crisis situation. I'll tell you exactly what they're saying over here, and then we'll just kind of go from there. All right, let's see. The latest on the Ukraine-Russia crisis, specifically, looks like allies gear up. U.S. allies gear up to hammer Russia's economy after Putin launches attack. Like we talked about, we knew that all these other groups are going to begin this process. Zelensky, which is basically the president of Ukraine, declares martial law after Putin launches attacks. Ukrainian President Zelensky said Thursday that he was imposing martial law across the country after Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a military operation targeting eastern Ukraine. The NBC News reporters in the central capital of Kiev and the northeast city of Kharkiv reported hearing loud explosions or thuds just minutes after Putin's announcement. The attacks ended hopes for a diplomatic solution that the United States and its allies had been attempting for weeks, which was such BS. We knew that the U.S. wasn't going to be able to do anything about it. We knew that Putin was going to go in. Prior to Putin's announcement, Zelensky said he tried to call the Russian leader but was rebuffed, which is another way of saying just, Putin would not take his call. Ukraine's foreign minister said in a tweet that the country was prepared to defend itself in the face of Russian aggression, which is hilarious because they can't. Russia just has too many military vehicles and troops. Don't panic. We're strong. We're prepared. We will win, Zelensky told Ukrainians on Thursday, according to an NBC News translation. Obviously, the president was trying to get his troops ready to go, excited to go ahead and defend it. But I don't know if Zelensky will survive tomorrow or even today. He'll be one of the first people to be basically found and imprisoned. Okay, so Ukrainian-controlled part of Luhansk announced its general evacuation. The Ukrainian-controlled part of Luhansk, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, announced a general evacuation on Thursday morning as Russia attacked Ukraine. Evacuation by trains being organized for those who cannot leave independently, he added, directing people to the, God, there's no way I can even pronounce those, Svatone, Lishansk, and Rubitsk train stations. During the evacuation, please remain calm, listen to the instructions, yada yada. Luhansk is one of the two separatist regions backed by Russia, along with Donetsk. Both regions, known as Oblast in Ukraine, are split between parts controlled by Ukraine and by pro-Moscow separatists. So Ukraine says at this point that was attacked through the Russian, Belarus, and Crimea borders. Ukraine was attacked through multiple borders. At 5 a.m., the state border of Ukraine and the area with the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus was attacked by Russian troops supported by Belarus, the service said. It added that attacks are being carried out in Luhansk, Sumy, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, I'm not even sure how to pronounce these regions, areas on the eastern and northern borders of Ukraine. The attacks are targeting border units, border patrol, and checkpoints using artillery, heavy equipment, and small arms, the border service said. In addition, the attack takes place from the Autonomous Republic of Crimea side, or Crimea or whatever side said the service. I think it's Crimea. So this is sadly all about essentially getting fuel for the petrol heavy Russia. This is kind of very similar to America being petrol heavy in its evolution. Obviously, America is way more evolved when it comes to where it's going, what things are going to be going into the future when it comes to electric vehicles, electric drones, electric everything. So at this point, the problem is that essentially we do not have a solid platform or system as a country as to what we are supposed to be doing. We know that the United Allies will probably react more militarily first, and that America, because America just doesn't have stuff over there right now that's super duper close, that's going to be en masse. Like they don't have enough. But the moment that other countries in Europe interact with this, it becomes World War III. The moment China interacts with this, it becomes World War III. The moment the United States interacts with this, it becomes World War III. It's just a title, just like World War II was. But the problem is that here's the thing. America has always been very lucky. Mexico, south of America, is militarily like a weak nothing. Totally irrelevant and unimportant in the schemes of mass capabilities with military defense and attack. It's useless. On our northern lovely side is Canada, a slightly better but still unique and mostly worthless military capacity group. Although the Canadians always love to think they're better than Americans, but the bottom line is nobody attacks them because of where they are, what they have, who they are, yada yada yada. So the bottom line is, and I'm sure I'll see some people in here be like, no, Canada's amazing. That's fine. Canada is amazing. It's a really cool place, but let's call it like it is. Mexico, a tropical place, me, a Florida person would like that, but let's call it like it is. Nobody has an interest in those two countries. Those two countries don't threaten in the slightest America. And basically putting it simply, we are a big air travel and a big water travel away from the militaries of the Chinese and the Russians. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, I think what will happen here is China has been developing a lot of new technologies with basically their space satellites. And what they've been able to do is create satellites that can throw other satellites, that can cut up other satellites. They even have satellites that I've been told have a lot of military capacity, like lasers and bombs and stuff like that. So what will happen now is a situation where we're going to be seeing how advanced China really is. And you got to remember, China has always been the oddball out when it comes to interacting with the scientific community, because the scientific community had to constantly cancel them out of being able to interact with, the Europeans, the Indians, etc., with space-related activities, or even particle-based activities, Hadron Collider, etc. So as a result of that, China's been banned from the International Space Station, so they're making a much nicer one. I was, talking with different people as to what's going on with that. And the reality is our space station, we were supposed to get rid of it recently because it's just so old. But, the bottom line is we're going to keep it until like 2030 or whatever. But that space station is way, way far behind. And China is galloping ahead of us in space activities. In fact, if we didn't have Elon, we would be so far behind, it's not even funny. There's another problem that China currently has a significant population that is capable of being, to some degree, lost, which under their political and ethnic system would not be such a big deal to the leadership of China, which is not unfamiliar territory with China. They've always had a lot of human life to go ahead and spend in a war. Russia, similarly, has a lot of human life with capacity to spend in war. America, not so much. We've relied pretty heavily on a lot of our new toys to prevent loss of human life. But if this comes down to a landmass invasion situation, that's a problem. Now, there's another thing I just want to point out to before we kind of go into something I want to talk to you about when it comes to political stuff that's happening in this country. Yeah, America did do this exact same thing, except they did it with Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, that kind of area. You're right, but the difference is those were terrorist-led, you know, not militarily strong countries. Whereas now we're dealing with a militarily strong, very aggressive, very determined country who will not let Ukraine go to the European Union. There's no way, no NATO, none of that. And that's because they want the oil from that place. And it's more important to them than it is to us. So at the end of the day, Ukraine would always give preference to Biden and his son. It just is what it is. It's been, they have like enough proof at this point. But I'm sure Ukraine at this point has had communications with Biden about what Biden intends to do. And I'm sure there's already a plan to have troops be sent over there to stop things if they're not already on their way. We won't find out about it until, after, 6 to 8 hours after they've already been sent over and they've started fighting. Let's do a quick check real quick to see what's going on, the Russia-Ukraine situation. So basically, obviously, let's see what's going on. The Wall Street Journal, let's see what they have to say at this point. Missiles and airstrikes hit Ukraine's capital, more than a dozen other cities across the country Thursday, minutes after President Vladimir Putin announced a military operation that he said seeks to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine and bring its leaders to trial. Yeah, I know a lot of you guys, and I love the one person who was like, why doesn't the president of Ukraine just give Putin what he wants? Because they'll kill him. They'll bring him to trial and immediately kill him. They will hang him, or they will just put him to a firing squad. Ukrainian officials said that the initial wave of strikes targeted military installations, airfields, and government facilities across the nation. President Biden called Mr. Putin's move an unprovoked, unjustified attack in Ukraine, pledging further action against Russia. So it's almost certain at this point that the U.S. is going to get involved, which makes it immediately a World War III scenario. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia's actions against Ukraine world markets, stocks fell, while Brent crude oil, the global benchmark, topped $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014. So you can see what's going on. Lisa Burnett, thank you so much for the $1.49 donation. I really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it. So yeah, basically non-perishables, stock up on that. Get fuel for your vehicles because it's about to go way up in price. Remember that the cost of food is going to go way up in price as well. Certain products that are going to come back into fashion in the U.S. are guns, obviously. Another certain product that's going to come back into fashion in the U.S. Would be essentially, putting it relatively simply, will be things like wool items because we produce a lot of wool. We produce a lot of chocolate. We produce a lot of agricultural equipment. So what I foresee is the U.S. military, if it becomes a World War III situation, they'll be grabbing every welder that they can. They'll be grabbing every scientist that they can to try and fix the situation. Now, I want to talk to you guys about basically going forward your rights and what happens with essentially the Biden administration, what's going on. I was spending some time thinking through essentially what some of the problems are with how we interact with the Biden administration, what's going on when it comes to our ability to get things from them, etc. I wrote down some ideas and I wanted to go through them with you while this whole Ukraine situation kind of progresses. The whole idea behind this is why politicians, they fail us. They always fail us. They have never been able to cure poverty. They've never been able to go forward and cure the housing crisis or the medication crisis or the insurance crisis. They've never been able to go ahead and cure any of these. So just hear me out while I kind of walk you through some of this stuff. And if you don't agree with it, I'm cool with that. Let me know what you don't agree with. We can always go through it. I respect that, and I want you to be open-minded and think about this stuff. So here's the thing: this is why politicians fail us. Politicians control committees, and committees rely on statistics, and statistics are capable of being manipulated, which results in a battle of the experts. And ultimately, the best option for the politician usually prevails. Okay. This is at times counter to the desire of the American people. Due to this, time works differently for politicians. Politicians, they're used to years, presidencies, etc. It's a situation that almost always lacks immediacy. Okay. The system is designed, our House, our Senate making laws, the president, etc. The system is designed to gridlock and then be reworked, right? It's supposed to be able to open up the gridlock and then we can rework it. But it doesn't. It doesn't anymore. It doesn't do that. Scalia would talk about how it would, and then it would open up and we'd be able to work something out. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's just pure gridlock. Things get released, assigned to committees, like the bills get assigned to the committees, and then they either die or get shoved into a mega bill with a bunch of poison that people need to swallow to get what they were originally promised. Politicians are an elite class. They don't make any products, they just deem law worthy. They are accountable to their party more than to basically the people who elected them. And they have special pensions, health care, etc., unlike the American who voted for the politician who now sits in the tufted chair. If they cross their party, the politician, they are censured and censored. If they cross the American people, they are usually voted back in. It's kind of weird how that happens. A millionaire does not think like a hand-to-mouth American, and most of these politicians are obviously millionaires. They don't, and here's why. A millionaire knows that he or she will eat, will bathe, will be dressed, groomed, and with transportation, all while under a roof. That's not like most of the retired. That's not like most of the disabled. A hand-to-mouth person does not enjoy this pleasantry of knowing what's going to happen on their weekly, monthly life schedule. When you live without, you live with fear, which grows into hatred and then suffering, desperation, and finally action. When you don't know when you will be kicked out, you are paralyzed by the pending homelessness that occurs to a lot of the disabled and the retired. Politicians use emotions to sell things, similar to a timeshare salesman asking a husband when the last time was that he did something nice for his wife. People accept and buy things when they are fearful and sad. Look at the legislation that they sold you for the stimulus money. It's a lot of bad shit in that legislation. The king and his nobles took from the people their rights, and in their place a stimulus check was spent. A stimulus check paid for through taxes, which was paid for by the American people, which means you got what you should never have had to pay to the United States government to begin with, because they had it to just give away. 1860, the year, mark it, there was no income tax at all. No income tax. The year of 1860. Politicians who scream that they should tax the rich are the rich. Politicians who scream they are poor like you and I are screaming it from their third floor kitchen. There's no politician who is for the people, that wishes to end the right to bear, the right to own, the right to live free, and the right to audit a government. No American civilian has ever audited the government because the government audits the government. If politicians need money to campaign, then the system has failed its intended purpose of being biased for its citizens before any corporation dictates future policy, right? Because the corporations dictate everything because they pay for the entire thing. They pay for the people that get in. If politicians were not allowed to campaign, but were allowed 50 bullet points in an executive summary, whereby we must read it to vote in their election, we would not have a single politician currently in office that we currently interact with on a daily basis. None of them. They'd all be gone. We would have voted in 0 of them. Maybe Bernie, maybe. If politics don't stand for manipulation, then why did the 2 prosecutors in New York just resign? Not withdraw the claim, fully resign against the Trump inflation lawsuit. Now, I don't know if you guys know this. It was covered up by a lot of the news media. I thought New York City was going to literally hammer, screw in these giant bolts into Donald Trump. I thought they were going to screw him against the wall for potential inflating of his assets to get tax breaks and things like that. The 2 prosecutors in New York City, they didn't just pull back the claim, they flat out resigned. That's got to tell you something. And that's because they didn't find anything against him. So it's just, I personally thought they were going to nail him to the wall on tax evasion. They didn't find any. The prosecutors resigned. Our top-level positions, maybe they're immune. Or are they battling over which family will hold the keys to the most powerful, wealthy, and enduring position on earth, being president of the United States? There is no diamond, no element, no life on earth that comes close to the worth and capability of that office. Nothing is below the actions of greed to obtain it. The Roman emperor, this is Biden, will shortly set his gaze on Elon Musk, for the innovator poses too great a threat without enough kneeling and cowering to the Oval Office ring. We, the people, could tax the politicians for each outcome that does not benefit the American people, just like how we, the people, are more taxed for each outcome that lessens our standard of living and increases our payments to the king. What happens when we vote for all new people? What happens when the dynasties are silenced? Well, the business as usual is abruptly severed. If we are to acknowledge that those who vote along party lines are the weak wolves under the breath and teeth of the alpha wolf, then surely we, the sheep, who outnumber them, have been cowering for decades, saying that the criminals who scare us should equate to legislation that restricts us. Politicians barter your rights for their increased power. There was once a continent where you owned your land and dictated how you would use it, unencumbered by HOAs, counties, and other laws. You lived off the land, you grew things, you built things, and you were proud. I know not one soul who is proud today. They are all torn by what has been taken from them, living with hatred, living with bitterness, and most of all, hopelessness. If you want to fix the system in this country, you must fix the politicians. A healthy sign of politics for the people is as follows. Voting by party lines does not exist. Politicians vote for those bills that benefit their state citizens the most. Bills must be introduced and reassigned to a new committee every 4 months. Nothing sits, nothing dies. No bill just sits there. It always gets reassigned to a new committee. It gets moved. People look at it. It keeps going forward. Campaigning is over. Politicians create a 50-point list of achievements that they wish to complete with a plausible plan of action for each, an executive summary. Citizens vote once. They have studied those executive summaries. They'll be prepared in written form, audio, and other forms for disabled individuals to be able to understand what's going on with them. The voting system is audited by the people, the state, and the federal government. All groups have equal investigative powers and access, including one built by the people. A blockchain system exists to vote. That's what we need. And people are able to verify their vote during and after an election has occurred. One vote, one person, only legible votes are counted, and rejected voters with rejected votes may vote again to replace their rejected vote. Proof of life will be required to vote. It's got a lot of people out there who are dead who are still voting. An election ends one night and all votes must be counted by the next night. No exceptions. We can build a system that can handle high volume votes. If tampering occurs, high level felonies, and a new vote. Okay. If at any time vote tampering occurs, a new voting must occur. The person who commits vote tampering faces high-level felony charges, with the minimum being 15 years. Yes, people will still die for the funding of their family in the long run to fix a voting situation, but people will also know that the funding can be stolen back from the people who promised it in the first place to their family. If people commit suicide as a result of an ongoing investigation related to an election, then a congressional inquiry must automatically be opened, and a complete expedited adjudication must occur before other matters take place. When one takes their life, very little history of suicidal tendencies, the sound of rotting corruption drips heavily. No donation to political potential may be made above $1,000. Want to see that politicians suggest laws that destroy inflation and boost the dollar's worth? Well, make it so that they can't get more than $1,000 per person. If people support them, they will help them. Corporations will not be allowed to create a shadow political party army for these politicians. Debates will be held without an audience and will be published on all channels without buy-in rights for a particular legacy media. If you wish to support a candidate by buying flags and buttons, they cannot be sold by the politician and can only be sold by their supporters who are not within the political organization. Every politician's speech that is made must acknowledge a failure of their own towards the American people that they are intending to assist. All politicians must debate their opposing politician on a subject matter that they are spearheading. They'll verbally battle their ideas, and we will judge them as employees who are pitching an idea to us. It is a great and unwavering honor to be an American. We are the light that others run to, whether you respect the flag or not. Realize with not enough food, not enough shelter, and not enough strength, people of third world nations, basically find their way to come here. So the bottom line with this is that if you want America to remain a dream of excellence, you cannot allow politicians to feed so heavily at the trough. For we are a nation of varied human species, bound by our desire for freedom from government, slavery, and unlawful takings. If you want the future of America to be bright, innovative, and superior to other nations, you must acknowledge that one culture did not accomplish the United States of America. Not one race, not one skill set, not even one army. Many of you have lived genetically on this land for 3, 5, even 10 generations longer than mine. If we don't acknowledge that we are immigrants, all of us, and that Native Americans are the true Americans before the United States and colonies, then we are doomed. Look at what our government did to them, the Native Americans. Look at what our government does to us. It's a solid F on the report card. It's horrifically sad how Indians had pure freedom, and then we shot them over it. It's kind of sad and also funny how modern Americans are labor machines to credit cards, student loans, and mortgages. Sounds like slavery with extra steps. If we beings are so close to God's creation, then why don't we have free education? Or are we still so lacking in evolution that we can't achieve what existed with the Indians before the first wooden fence was erected for war against native nations? They had free education. Think about it. They welcomed the settlers until they learned to hate them. The disease spreading did not help, of course. Now, as a political weapon, immigrants are used to empower political party votes. Instead of America assimilating, we are at war with the pawns on the chess table, being the immigrants. It's interesting. For a country filled with massive areas of unused land for sale, we restrict people from setting up an RV or tent on these small plots of land. You know who did this? The restriction with the land? People with money who want to control you, slavery owners, modern day HOA people, politicians, Wall Street market manipulators. They don't want godless creatures living off the land. Rather, they want cogs cleaning their shingles for a parade that will never get approved by the town council. Don't forget, you aren't allowed to have a flag on the side of your house. Don't forget, you are not allowed to choose your paint colors unless from the intended list. Imagine having a mortgage for 30 years, 20% interest credit cards, and a job that pays the least amount you can get away with. But let's go back further. Imagine being put into death camps where you were starved and then forced to dig your own grave. My people went through that. But let's go back even farther. Imagine being brought over on a ship from Africa to be whipped to produce products in the hot summer fields for the sake of your life being extended for another day. But let's go back farther. Imagine having 50 generations of your race living off the land, studying the stars, feeling the air, and a musket ball rips off the feather you had earned over your lifetime. Only one thing fixes this: unencumbered, free education, and the weapons of the people being one step ahead of the government that they will bind through their votes. People fear Trump, people fear Biden. Proof that the government is too powerful. People go starving on minimal food stamps. Proof that the government is too powerful. People retire on little and wait for death without the means to fight it. Proof that the government is too powerful. People can't afford the basics on a failed dollar. Proof again that the government is too powerful. People can't afford to buy a house. Proof that the government is too powerful. People can't afford the fuel to go and explore. Proof that the government is too powerful. People can't even remember their culture. Proof that this government is too powerful. People are restricted in their ability to sue the government due to immunity. Another proof that the government is too powerful. People are getting attacked by violent criminals who are repetitively released from jail and prison. Proof that our wonderful government is too powerful. You see, we all think the government can fix society, but we, the people, actually built it, and then we hand over the keys to politicians. Just enough power should be allotted to fix things to those governments. If things are being manipulated and never fixed, it means that the thing created to fix them is too powerful. If poverty, education, taxes, hunger, and crime haven't been fixed by now, then the government is too powerful. So powerful that they can manipulate us to believe they are fixing a problem while never actually fixing it. Christians call this the devil. Jews call this basically the tempter. Muslims call it Iblis or Iblis. Satan is merely the existence of a power seeking to create perfection in their own light through great cost of others. So the first step is simple: take away their extra power, the governments, and only endow them with enough power to fix the problem. If they don't fix the problem, we excommunicate them from politics and bring in their replacement. You are all owners of the American government. Start firing the bad executive employees. If you feel like you are alone and that the government will hurt you, trust me. I'm an American purely because my race ran away from Germany. Do you want to fix this country? Or do you want to run away to a different country? Because we're kind of stuck in America. We all ran away from someplace to get here. So the question I have for you is simple. Are you going to start acting like an owner or an immigrant who keeps getting pushed around? This video will undoubtedly, because I've said these things, be demonetized before it's even published. I'm not asking for likes and such. I'm asking for you to learn how to be an executive citizen. Are you capable of reducing the government's power and increasing your own? Right now, you are the dollar bill, and they are the bank. They dictate your worth and when you will be used. Let's change that. All right, let's do a quick update specifically to find out what's currently going on with good old Russia. Let's see what's happening on Google specifically with the situation. Okay, 4 minutes ago, NATO condemned the attack. We know that Zelensky has already brought in basically martial law. Airports in southern Russia have restricted operations, aviation authority says. Several Russian airports have restricted operations in relation with the ongoing situation in Ukraine, according to a statement from Russia's Federal Air Transport Agency. The restrictions will be in effect until March 2nd. Wow. So they're planning a whole week that it's going to take them to take over basically Ukraine. I don't think it'll take that long. Let's see what else is going on. The mayor of Kharkiv in Ukraine warned citizens not to leave their homes. The mayor, the second largest city in Ukraine, has urged citizens to stay home as explosions and sounds of artillery are reported across the country. Please do not leave your homes today due to the complicated situation. Schools, kindergartens, and other institutions do not work today. Obviously, schools are shut down until the situation becomes clearer. At the time, public transport works as usual. I will keep you informed of what is happening and the actions of city authorities throughout one day. Elsewhere in Ukraine, the national capital, Kiev, is second largest city, have both sounded air, and second largest city, Lviv, have been sounding air raid sirens, but the mood is still remarkably calm. On the ground, according to CNN reporters on the ground, it's about 8 a.m. There, with what looks like normal morning traffic as people head to work. Well, I don't think they're really going to be going to work going forward. So bottom line, let's see. Okay, so let's see real quick. Okay, and I see there's a bit of a fight in the thing here. So we're just going to kind of cool things down, and let's see. I removed Ted for just a little bit, so that people can kind of calm down with that whole situation. I'm sure Ted will be back, which is totally fine. It's just a temporary thing, and we'll go from there. Anyways, so gotcha. In your prayers. So I love that. That was a cute little thing there. So here's the thing, guys. I would like you to understand that I have to go to sleep because I have to, very simply put, wake up and do 2 hearings. My belief is that about a third to maybe half of Ukraine will be taken over by the time I wake up. I think that by day 2, so by Friday, either the Ukraine president will either be killed or essentially he will be captured or he will have run into a neighboring nation. Kind of the bottom line is this. I see Ted made it back. The bottom line is this. Just keep in mind, America is safe, but prices are going to go up across the board. Get your food, get your fuel. Also, please keep in mind that the real problem is not Russia here. The real problem for the United States is China. China's already made a lot of promises to Taiwan. And kind of the problem that I'm a little bit worried about with this situation is that if China starts to go after Taiwan and Ukraine isn't enough and Russia starts to go into Europe, Europe will be able to hold off Russia. But there's nobody that's coming for Taiwan. There's nobody there that's going to be able to save Taiwan other than basically America and Australia and maybe India. That's basically it. Obviously, the Muslim-based nations are not going to be rushing out to save Taiwan. The other islands of that area, I mean, we might see Japan getting involved. We might not. But kind of the bottom line at this point, guys, is that we're seeing the beginning of World War III. I hope you enjoyed this video where I kind of went through the basics of what's going on. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful night. Thank you so much for the donations. I'll catch you tomorrow where we'll be doing. Actually, tomorrow's our big video. So where I go live for 2 hours. I will catch you a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful night. And yeah, China's a way bigger threat. Wendy, you're absolutely right. China's a way bigger threat than Russia any day. Technologically, they're a way bigger threat. Position-wise, they're a much bigger threat because what they've done with the China Sea. They're building ships nonstop for their navy. Their new fighter planes are coming out. It's a scary time. But anyways, guys, you have a wonderful night. I'll catch you later, and thanks so much for popping on. All right, bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.